The Becoming Da Vinci Show is sponsored by the Kinetic Experience, where entrepreneurs go to have even more success and more fun in their business and life.
Becoming Da Vinci.
So to learn more about the Becoming Da Vinci Show, visit us at www.becomingdavincishow.com, where you can learn all sorts of stuff about Leonardo da Vinci and what we are doing to correlate his life and his example with modern day entrepreneurs and self-directed learning.
Becoming Da Vinci.
Imagine a catapult. It's a little 3D printed catapult, easy to reprint, easily remade. So if it breaks, who cares? And a student has the opportunity to experiment with this catapult. It'll have replaceable arms and maybe a replaceable propulsion, or not propulsion, but rather the rubber band can be swapped out. So it can be manipulated in multiple ways. And a student is then given an hour or 2 hours to build a model, a mathematical model of how this works, and how changing out different parts might change the way that your graph would look. And then at the end of an hour or 2 hours, they're given a task like, here, I'm going to put this target precisely right here, and you get 3 shots if you can hit the marshmallow directly in the middle using your model as your guide, then you get an A. I'd be lying if I said that was precisely my invention. My brother is a teacher as well, and he does really amazing things with his students. So they're incredibly lucky. But I guess what I mean to say then is somewhere between interactive art and interactive education materials that are also aesthetically pleasing is really where my interest is right now.
I'm so glad we found you.
Yeah.
I am too. Thank you for having me. This is cool.
Yeah, no, this is really awesome because we're actually working on the development of a school. And so bringing in a lot of these concepts.
Yeah. We're building a school for the ages 5 to 18.
That's a big range.
Yes, self-directed learning. So I was a co-founder of one here in Grapevine, Texas, and it's doing awesome. And it's amazing. Kids are able to learn and explore and pursue their passions the way they want to. And we want to do something very similar and bring in exactly what you're talking about as a component to offer to the children, and just basically teachers or guides and mentors versus teaching unless it's asked. So I love the interactive everything. It's perfect.
So you've already started the school, or it's
a different one? Yes. So I was a co-founder of, it's called Macarios Community School in Grapevine, Texas. And it's a democratic free school. So the students have the freedom to learn whatever they want to learn. That's the free part. There's no testing, there's no curriculum, nothing, unless they choose and follow a path. And there's a lot of classes offered, and there's a variety and such. And then the democratic part is everyone has an equal voice. And there is a judicial committee and everything. So the school is governed by the community, by the students and the faculty combined. So
that's an interesting idea. Is it sort of that you would have like modules, so contained modules that a student could voluntarily put themselves through, or is that even clear yet?
They can if they want. They don't have to. They can play video games all day. They can do science experiments all day.
So you can have structure inside of self-directed learning, but you can't have self-directed learning too much inside of structure. Does that make sense?
I think so.
So in a self-directed environment, you can have a very structured regimen and style, because that may be what you need, versus somebody else that needs a little bit more exploration, or they're at a state where they need more exploration.
I see what you're saying.
So it's definitely not top-down teaching, or because this worked for this group of kids, you should do it this way. It's never that. It's what works for you. What are you interested in? How can we help and support you? Do you really just want to hit on a keyboard all day long and pound and hear different notes? Or do you want guidance in how to learn how to read music or how to play a song? So it's meeting them where they're at.
So a little story is we have a 4.5-year-old, and just recently, like 2 weeks ago, he asked if we could enroll him in school. And like, well, okay, why? So, because I want to learn my alphabet and I want to learn my letters and my numbers. Out of the blue. So he all of a sudden wants to learn this because he knows that my older kids, they get to play on the keyboard, and they're using an app that tells them the number and the letter so that he can correspond to the piano, right? And so he's like, oh, I want to be able to do that. So I need to learn the numbers and the letters so I can. So all of a sudden this became the thing for him, and we didn't force him to do any of it. Now he knows all his letters. Now he's learning his numbers, and it's all from his own desire to do that. Then
right.
that is
sort of.
Go ahead.
If you have the opportunity, if you have a nesting place for the information to land, then suddenly it sticks. If you're trying to, I drew an analogy from my mom once while I was attempting to put myself through education school, because man, is that hard, unreasonably hard for people who want to teach, because there's so much work involved. But as I was trying to learn to teach, and just trying to survive in the classroom, I felt like I was going to my classes and they were giving me this information about the minutia of how to orchestrate what's going on in my classroom. And what I was telling my mom was, I feel like what's happening is I'm building a building, which represents my ability to teach, and I'm working on this foundation and just kind of some underground stuff, and they're telling me how to do the fixtures and the gargoyles up on the edges. I'm like, I'm not even remotely capable of taking that information in right now.
Exactly.
So you need a nesting place, sort of the structure around a piece of information before it'll find a place to really adhere.
Yes.
I feel that for sure.
Yeah, it's really giving them that foundation of that freedom to develop that foundation so that they have the solidarity in who they are and how they learn before you then tag on the gargoyles and all of the decoration. Like, let them really understand the nuts and bolts and the framework of how they learn, what interests them, how they go about dissecting things before you start throwing in what you think they need or what all those things are.
I think a fundamental difference between the scenario you described with your 4.5-year-old and what most students are facing in school is that your 4.5-year-old was faced with an actual real life problem that he or she needed to overcome, and suddenly the information was relevant. When you ask, a math student is like, every math student asks, when am I ever going to use this in the real, you know what? You needed a real life problem where this was relevant before you would stop asking that question. And then you'd be like, of course I need to know this.
Yes.
Exactly.
You got it.
That's
so
exactly in a nutshell.
Maybe something that could really benefit a school like this then would be finding a way to let these students face real life problems. Like, that's hard. I don't know how you'd fabricate that. You'd have to be really.
You don't have to. It's just life.
That's just life, man. They're gonna come up with the problem. So somebody's gonna see your artwork, for example, and some kid's gonna be like, well, how do I do that? And it's gonna be like, oh, well, you got to learn CAD, or you got to learn this, and you have to learn this programming language, and this is how I drive the robot. Oh my God, where do I start? And you start, you start here, right? But if you really think about it, it's the same way you learn anything. We learn, I learn whatever, right? Like the process of today, this is the first time we're doing Facebook Live.
Through Zoom,
on a recording, on a podcast episode.
Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, I'm happy to watch Facebook for comments so we can interact with them too. And so, but we're learning. Next time we'll learn how to be better and faster, and right. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
It's just letting them have the freedom to know that they can have fun, they can learn, they can fail, and it's all okay. And
I feel like that sort of formula fits very well for things that a student might want to learn that are of the sort of creation variety. I want to learn, I want to build or be able to do that. Then it's an easy line to trace and figure out what skills are related en route. But what if the situation or the thing that needs to be learned, the lesson is a lesson in empathy, and so how do you fabricate a situation where empathy ends up being the relevant lesson? You have to just let them go and mess each other up and see what happens.
Okay, so being in a democratic free school, yes, that is absolutely what happens, is that these kids, they want to be part of this community. And yet every action that they take and word that they use impacts the community. And because everyone has a voice and a vote, and they have the judicial committee, they can then be like, I didn't like that so-and-so did this and it affected me this way. I want to change our rule about X, Y, and Z. And they have to present it to the community. They talk about it to the community. There's both sides seen. It's voted upon. Then if that other child goes back and breaks it again, then the judicial committee gets called. So then you have a jury, you have a judge, you have to defend yourself, you have to talk it through, you have to and all of it's a learning lesson. So that's when you teach in the moment, in the action that's happening, when they feel that pain, that's when you teach them what empathy is. And you have to start with the logic side of it and then show them the emotion side of it if they're not naturally empathetic.
So are you describing like a miniaturized legal system within the school? Wow, yeah. Very interesting. And
yeah, and you have 5-year-olds who are doing it. 5-year-olds get the concept. Like absolutely can stand their ground up to an 18-year-old.
Wow. And an interesting sort of premise too. I don't know if premise is the right word, but an interesting element within that is that we'd have to accept that our students or our kids are going to make mistakes and fall down and scrape their knee in the most overt way, and we have to not step in and manipulate the situation at all. I feel like that's a good strategy, but I feel like that's really hard for most modern-minded people to accept.
I'm not going to say modern-minded. It's not. It's old-fashioned people. It's people who want to control the situation and protect. If you're an open thinker and you're willing to embrace what happens and let your child fail, I mean, they're going to learn much quicker than if you protect them and protect them and protect them, and then all of a sudden they're in the real world and like, what the fuck? I'm supposed to pay my bills? You paid them for me. Well, we have a budget? Oh, I'm supposed to eat? I have to wash my clothes? Like
all those basic skills that are crucial.
Yeah.
So that sounds like instead of laying out a precise pathway for our students, and this is how you get from this point to this point. If I were to build off that analogy, we want to be just sort of bumpers on the greatest perimeter, just whatever you're going to do in here. And then if things get a little too crazy, maybe we'll just corral them back in. But otherwise, interesting. I like that.
I mean, guess what? It's pretty much what parents do from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. and on the weekends.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's true. True.
Think about it that way. That's what they do. We in a traditional environment, kids come home, they do homework, and then they do whatever else they want to do, and the parents are guiding that. And on the weekends, they guide that. They take them to places so they can interact with other friends and let them do their thing. And then it's just the concept of education, right? Can you learn outside of a structured learning environment? That's really the question. And if the answer is yes, then there's different ways to do it. There's Socratic schools that are more along the Socratic method. There's the self-directed learning schools. There's just
wide variety.
And we promote more an understanding around personalized education. Meaning to say, again, some people may want a very structured environment. Some kids may. I really don't know if I care about what the parents want as much, right? Because it's really what is best for the kid. And we have conversations around this all the time. So, we could take a few minutes and talk around, we've obviously talking around self-directed education here as a continuation of that question. And we have a conversation too about what is the limits. So I believe, for example, and what I've been promoting in our conversations around the school we like to open is that there has to be some baseline core values, culture elements that we can establish so that, let's say mindfulness is something you brought up, right? I think before we even got on the official call. Yeah. So mindfulness, I learned about mindfulness in that word and that phrase and meditation really fairly recently. I'm 39. So I would say in the last few years, right? And then really focused on meditating when I can meditate, or, coming back to presence and present moment pretty recently. Isn't that something that we could impart to the students even when they're 5 years old? Is it okay to bring that kind of a culture and that kind of a practice into the school and not really violate the self-directed learning concepts? And I'm saying yes. I'm saying things like that. Why let them stumble upon that 20 years from now? Mm-hmm. Bring it in sooner. Or empathy or gratitude, these kind of things.
The soft skills.
These are all soft skills. This is the way we feel like it's important to us. Sustainability, inclusivity, these are core values of our company. Why is that something we can't just run the place in, right? So kids don't have to learn later on in life why maybe it's a good idea to conserve water. Like, well, just we conserve water here because it's important. We want to sustain our earth or whatever it is, right? So these are kind of like back to the bumpers, like what do we provide as bumpers inside of the organization or inside of the school so that inside then we have a healthy environment for them to continue to move forward in whatever direction. If it's, well, I want to learn piano or then I want to learn cello, and you know what? I just really focus in on math, and I'm learning math because I really want to make a catapult that goes further, and I don't understand how the mechanism works. So how do we do that? And, you know, and then they go off like that.
Well, I think the self-directed learning would allow for a lot of those opportunities, but I feel like mindfulness is something that I think a lot about. And I feel like if we have a school full of, I guess, a broad range of ages, I feel like a concept like mindfulness is something that would have to be seeded in and in fact invented for the students to mess with rather than fully laissez-faire.
And that's where the conversations that we're having right now is what things do we seed and what things do we just let them figure out? Yeah. What things are, this is the way, this is the little community that you're coming into and we're building together. So this is the things that matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Well, I think mindfulness and gratitude both have particular significance to me right now, especially. But I feel like a lot of, when I was a teacher, I saw a lot of preoccupation with the phone. And I mean, every teacher you ever talk to is going to say that every kid has their phone out all day nonstop. And I feel like that is precisely the antithesis of mindfulness.
Yes.
Like you are so detached at the moment that you're on your phone that that's the entirety of your reality. Mm-hmm. I was reading a book, I want to say, what is it called? I was reading a consciousness book. I don't remember what it was called. But they were describing an experiment where 10 numbers would flash across the screen very rapidly, like on the matter of hundredths of a second. Mm-hmm. I don't want to precisely say what the numbers are because I might be orders of magnitude off. So let's just say very, very fast, on the limit, close to the cusp of what we're capable of interpreting. Okay. 10 numbers across the screen would flash, each in sequence, and we'd go just up to, like I said, the cusp of what we could interpret. And then we'd take one of those numbers. This is an experiment run by people who know what they're doing. We'd take one of those numbers and we switch it with a letter, and then we'd propose that somebody should look at the sequence of numbers, this rapid sequence, and when they see a letter, they should remember it and then report it at the end. And in fact, many people were very capable of detecting the single letter. And even if you were to have a letter at the beginning and at the end, 2 letters were even detectable. But if you took the letters and you stuck them too close together, say one right after the other, or even 2 after the first, then the second letter was no longer detectable. So in the moment it took a viewer to perceive and remember the first letter, they were unconscious of the second letter. They couldn't take in any extra information while they were trying to remember this first piece of information.
Wow.
So we actually lose touch with our capacity to perceive reality if we're too focused on a certain piece of information. And if that's our phone, maybe that's a far cry. But if you understand the analogy there, the idea is you're literally unconscious of your world around you when you're on your phone. That's not like just a poetic way of describing it. That's literally what's happening.
Yeah.
You're not in the world that's around you.
So we're going to put this out there. If you know anybody that should be covered on this show, please let us know. We're looking for people that are innovative, whether they have a business or not. We're looking for self-directed learners, innovative people who are always learning and trying new things.
Thank you for tuning in to the Becoming Da Vinci show. Join us next time as we learn more about Leonardo and modern day entrepreneurs.
Becoming Da Vinci.